Hi, everybody, and welcome to another Lioness community event. My name is Bobby Carlton. I'm the founder of Innovation Women and also the editor in chief and publisher of Lioness Magazine. Today, we are here to talk about learning and development and prioritizing it for leaders. I personally feel very excited about this topic. I'm responsible for learning and development for a whole team, but also I recognize that I don't know everything and I need all the help I can get in terms of getting more information into my system. So today we have three fantastic panelists with us. I'm going to start off with just some quick introductions. And also, while I'm doing that, the team is going to be dropping some links into the chat for upcoming sessions that we have. You can join us for Lioness Magazine networking in October. That's Wednesday, October 10th from 2 to 3 p.m. And also, while we're doing these presentations, if you are interested in asking a question or making a comment, if you can do that in the Q&A function, that would be super duper helpful to us. Helps us keep things organized. So, with that underway, and also there is a mention in there in the chat with our Lioness Entrepreneurship Forum that you can join on Facebook. We're going to just start off with these introductions. So I'm going to start with Julia Phelan. And oh gosh, now she got me doing it. So I was asking beforehand about how to pronounce her name. And she's like feeling good. So Julia is Dr. Julia, a former UCLA research scientist and co-founder of 211, an innovative learning consulting company focused on helping organizations or individuals design effective educational experiences or improve existing ones. Welcome, Julia. We also have with us today Teresa Scott. She is the founder of Bleuprint. Teresa empowers organizations to build a culture of learning that maximizes employee retention. Her work is rooted in the belief that emotional intelligence helps to positively develop talent and foster a positive learning culture. Teresa's people driven approach has successfully helped organizations improve employee engagement, fostering a culture of continuous learning and development. And Tiffany Whitney. Tiffany comes to the discussion with 18 years of leading learning and development. That's L&D for the rest of us here. For a Fortune 500 company, and has a unique perspective of being an entrepreneur who now coaches professionals in career transition, learning to define their second or even third act. And she's also a co author of the forthcoming book, Strength with Kathy Ireland. Ooh, little celebrity there. All right. So, welcome, ladies. And maybe just a quick put things into context. Tell me a little bit more about you. Julia, let's start with you.
Okay, thanks, Bobby. Yes, and I am feeling good today, so true to the name. And I just wanted to say that, alongside everything Bobby said, that my real passion is bringing the science of learning out of the ivory tower where it often resides and into the workplace to help use what we know to improve training design and outcomes for people in the workplace.
Fantastic. All right, Teresa.
Yeah. Well, thank you for the great introduction, Bobby. For me, my passion with learning just comes from a place of really getting a clear understanding of people. I worked in several organizations from trucking, retail, restaurant, technology. But the greatest thing I've learned over the years is that when you have a focus on people, you can really drive engagement home, really tap into their needs, and really to elevate learning for higher productivity and and, and collaboration take place. So, that's kind of me in a nutshell.
Okay. And Tiffany.
Thank you, Bobby. You did great introductions for us. I'm excited to be here with Julia and Teresa to talk about my absolutely favorite subject. So thank you. And just a little bit more about me. When I'm looking at this subject, I'm really focusing on what works, the impact that training and development can have. And one of the things that I've kind of caught on to in my career is looking at things through the lens of neuroscience. So how the brain works, what that means to learning and design and architecture and everything. So that's kind of my perspective that I like to bring to the conversation.
Fantastic. And I think we're going to start off. I've got some questions to ask, but I would like to actually start off with a survey for our attendees today. So we're going to hit that with the team here. We're actually asking you, how often are you personally able to participate in a learning opportunity? So is this something that you get to do daily, weekly, monthly? Or is this a, oh my goodness, this is why I'm here today, folks, type situation? And I'm going to start off by asking our panelists while that survey is running, why should leaders prioritize learning and development for their team and for themselves? Like maybe we can start with you, Tiffany.
That's a really good question, Bobby. And to me, I start thinking about engagement. It goes back, I'm sure everybody's familiar with the Gallup polls where they measure engagement and it results in people that are engaged or have higher productivity, that type of thing. So to me, promoting that is really about employee engagement.
Got it. Okay. And Julia.
Sorry, I got to close the poll is in front of me. um, I mean, I think there's all sorts of reasons, Bobby, why people need to prioritize learning and development. But yes, as Tiffany was saying, yeah, engagement is a huge thing. But if you really think about what people are looking for in a job, one of the things that they're looking for, we might imagine it's a high salary or a flexible work environment. But time and time again, we find that people want opportunities to learn and grow within their role. And as a leader, you have a unique position to be helping support that. And I think when you can prioritize it, and I know we're going to get into this in more detail, but when you can prioritize it and really, walk the walk and talk the talk, it can make a real difference in keeping the people that you want to keep in the workplace, keeping them engaged, keeping them happy, keeping them growing, all of those things.
Absolutely. And Teresa, just setting us up for this conversation. Why?
Yeah, honestly, when you look at it as a whole, the world has changed so fast around us. Like, I know people are probably sick of hearing it, but COVID proved just how fast things can change. And there's so many statistics and studies out there, like even Gen Zers are concerned that their skills today will be obsolete in the next 2 to 3 years. So I think it's a healthy habit to really get into a mode of learning, whether you're looking to stay in your role, go to a new one, make a lateral move. It's just where we are, with technology and everything else. That in learning is a true skill that just needs to be a habitual practice, honestly.
Okay. And Tiffany, one of the things that we were talking about beforehand is the whole learning culture. Like, how are we as leaders? Like, what are the things that we can do to encourage a learning culture inside our organization?
So I love that question, Bobby. And when I think about it, my experience now as an entrepreneur is really talking to professionals every day that are unengaged and they're really looking to exit from their current employer because they don't feel valued. So I think that as a leader, making our employees feel valued, letting them know you care about them, their professional growth, I see two buckets that sits into for a leader. And one of them is going back to a brain perspective and lead with growth mindset. And that can look like a leader sharing their mistakes that they've made and how they've learned from those experiences with their employees, sharing learning experiences and insights, and promoting learning by setting learning goals for employees. And also, this is something that we always forget to do as leaders, or at least I always did, was celebrate successes that really demonstrate the use of new learning. We forget that. The second bucket is allocating resources. I can't stress how critical I really feel this is. It's not enough to provide learning. It's really, you need to offer training. You've got to support your employees to take time to learn. You can do that in a number of different ways by integrating it into, their daily work, using just-in-time tools, embedding it in systems, or just lunch and learns, mentoring, coaching programs. So there's a lot of different ways that I think leaders can do that.
Okay. And Teresa or Julia, if either one of you want to jump in on this one too, like what can the leaders do? How do they encourage this learning culture? Are there specific things that we can hit?
I think another thing that can be really useful is to really help people to understand what are their specific strengths and weaknesses. How do they play into their own personal goals and the organizational goals? And Tiffany mentioned a growth mindset, but helping people to understand that they're not going to learn something like that learning takes time, and so to be patient and to sort of appreciate that learning is going to take practice and time and feedback and coaching and guidance and all of those things. And I think when we can have people constantly reflecting too on what they're doing, where they've been, where they're going to, can really be helpful again to see, okay, where are my strengths, where are the areas that I need to work on, and how am I making progress in those things, can be really, really helpful, because it's easy to imagine that, oh, you look at somebody who's really great at something, that, that just, happens to them overnight. And I think for me, when you can peel back the onion a little bit and really see how becoming expert at something takes time, can really help people to be more invested in doing that, because they understand that it is going to take some effort.
Absolutely. Teresa?
And something I really love about both of y'all's responses is that I think it's so important to talk about successes, understand it takes time, but also as leaders to talk about your failures, talk about your mistakes, admit them. I think because of social media and everything else, we come to think everything is perfect, right? That's not real. Like, we make mistakes. You see a moment in time of a success, but how many errors were made to get to that final hurrah? And I think we understand that mindset of, failure is a part of success. It's also a part of learning. You cannot learn without failure. You cannot grow without a mistake. They happen. They it just happens, and it's okay. I think if leaders normalize it and say, you know what, I know I'm the CEO, but I made a bad call, I made a mistake, but this is how we're going to correct it going forward. This is what we learned from that going forward. I think that's a true way to break down that barrier and say, you know what, we're getting to a point of growth and true learning as a culture, as a people, as a body. So that's how I would really look at that.
Awesome.
So,
Okay.
Bobby, I
Yeah.
think what Teresa just said is so powerful, that we learn through failure. I mean, that is really a powerful statement. And I think that a lot of times, we see people just successful, and back to what Julia said, we think they just appeared that way, that we don't see the 10 or 20 years that it took and all the failures it took for them to get to the place they are today. So I think that was a powerful idea, Teresa.
I was going to
Okay.
say, one other thing about that is that I think as a leader, we can also, help to talk about that journey and help people to understand it in a very explicit way. Because when we do have that understanding of how people learn and how it takes time, can be a real motivating force.
Yeah,
One of the things I'd love to
absolutely.
hit from all of you this next section is some specific examples or data about investing in professional development and how it does improve employee engagement and retention. are there some stories that we can share with the audience? And I am
You
happy
know,
to have anybody jump in.
yeah, I'll kind of throw something out there because I've seen several statistics from SHRM, HR Exchange Network over the last, couple of years where they talked about over 50% of organizations, their people would love opportunities to learn and grow and learn new things. They want to be challenged. You know, I've talked to people and I've experienced myself, even as an employee, that in times I've been bored, like for lack of better words, and I think the reality is when leaders understand that your employees do not mind going the extra mile. They do not mind taking on a little more responsibility. Hence why we've had burnout. Hence why we've told people, hey, turn off that email, because people who have worked themselves. They've stressed and worried about their jobs. But the reality is when you present quality learning and training in an organization, that really motivates employees. When they see, hey, such and such over here is doing this thing. I would love to increase my skills in leadership. I want to be a better leader. I want to more effectively communicate. I want to ask better questions. I want to talk about performance. Whatever that thing is, you know, that is that's the true retention strategy. I always tell people that training is really the underdog of the business. I think a lot of times it gets misconstrued, like, oh, it's compliance, or oh, we just need to check the box. But there are key things about your business, about your culture, that can really unite and create a lot of community when learning is really involved in a business. And so that's really something very practical that I think it's a shift in mindset and understanding that, if you look at, let's say, a 50-person organization, 50% can be retained just from having quality training alone. Like, what could that do for you in the long run? How could that really benefit your innovation, your collaboration, your communication, all these things that really play a major role?
Okay. All right. Tiffany or Julia, some examples. Julia, you seem you already
Yeah.
unmiked
Oh,
or unmuted.
it's the signal, right? Well, I was going to say, I mean, I think that we end up in a circle, right? That we want to attract good people to our organizations. And one of the things that attracts good people to our organizations is if there's some demonstration that we have a strong culture of learning, that we are emphasizing development, that we're creating pathways for improvement and for advancement. So that's something that can attract good people. Then we need to actually do it, to keep them there. And I mean, there's a ton of data out there that says that, the biggest, or one of the biggest reasons that people leave their jobs is because they don't see a future, and they don't see where they fit into the big picture. They don't have enough, career development or advancement opportunities. And so, I think it just, again, becomes this cycle that we want to keep people. And sometimes it feels, I don't know, tough when we're just talking about, okay, retention or engagement, but those really are the metrics that people are looking at. And ultimately, if people are leaving your organization because they don't see themselves growing there, that's a huge problem.
Yeah, absolutely. Tiffany?
There is always one study that I just loved because of the significance that it demonstrated. And that is when I think it was Neuro Leadership Institute worked with HP, and they provided growth mindset training to their managers. And what it did is when they measured that, it showed a 22% increase in employee engagement, which is huge. I mean, that's a really big number to look at. And that was only training managers, but showing how it impacted others in the organization. I love that. I just love that metric.
That's great. I'm actually noticing that in the chat, one of our attendees, Sharon Delaney, put in a comment. Have you heard the saying that professional development is the new pension? And to me, that's like looking for a company that offers a pension. Who does that these days?
I love that. I love that.
Yeah.
But professional development, we're all in. So That's great. I'd like to kind of take a look at internal mobility in terms of like ongoing career development. Teresa, you were particularly interested in this topic. Maybe you can jump in and talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, and it's funny to see that comment about professional development and new pension because, you know, since we've had this major shift in the workforce, we're remote and we're hybrid and we're in person and we're something else that we don't quite know yet. Like we're all over the place trying to navigate this new world of work, right? And what stands true and has always been true is that employees want to know what is the next step for me. I come into this job, and maybe the first 2 or 3 years, I didn't know what I wanted to do, but now I think I'm ready for leadership or more responsibility or that lateral move, whatever that looks like to them, whatever their goal is. I think you know having learning in place to help them get to that next level is just so 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 important. Um, I think where a lot of organizations, there's a lot of opportunity for them is to really be forward thinking and say, what does it look like to get to that next level? What should we build that out and for that to truly be? I've sat with organizations and really just talk to them and say, hey, what does career pathing look like for you? Oh, we don't know. But it's really something you should think about in the forefront, just like your employee onboarding experience. What does it look like to be effective in your job, be productive? What does it ask yourself? What does it look like to get to that next level? Whether it's first level manager, director, VP, what are the steps to get there? Because your competitors, your other organizations, what they're doing is setting their other people up for success. When you see people getting promoted and they're shouting about it on LinkedIn in these places, it's because they either had mentors, either had some good skill development training, they had things in place to get them to that next level. And that's the biggest thing in creating that career pathing, but also even that community in an organization to build them up to get them to that place of readiness.
Okay. And Julia, how
Yeah.
does ongoing career development promote internal mobility?
So I think there's a couple of key things here for leaders to be really aware of when it comes to internal mobility. One is that, over and over again, we see that even if leaders think that people are in their organizations are aware of internal opportunities, it turns out they're really not. Like a lot of people are leaving organizations because they don't see a way forward or a way for them to increase their impact. And I think a lot of leaders would say, well, no, 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 there are lots of opportunities here. But if the folks who would be taking advantage of them don't know about them, then that's a fail. And I think two of the really important things to recognize is you've got to really clearly outline and share the policies and procedures and opportunities that are present within your organization, and not be sending the message to your current people that, oh, we have a new position open, we're going to immediately look outside. Like, why? Like, there seems to be a huge inefficiency there. But to me, the biggest issue when it comes to internal mobility that I think that leaders need to be aware of is there are all sorts of flavors of that, right? And help people conduct their careers in ways that suit them. And people are different. Don't imagine that everyone on your team has the same, career goals or is the same path. Like not everybody wants to be the boss. Not everybody wants to be the manager. And career growth doesn't have to mean you're climbing up a ladder. It could mean that you are increasing your own impact within the organization, within the current role that you have. That doesn't mean you're not ambitious. It just means that your ambitions are different from the person who wants to move up to the next level or to the next role. And I think really appreciating that aspect is huge, because if you're someone who wants to increase their impact but doesn't see an opportunity to do that, it's just the same as there not being a next step for you.
Okay. Tiffany, I noticed that you unmiked. Is that on that same topic?
I can offer a little bit. I think that might be interesting to somebody. Since now I'm a solopreneur now, so I have like 3 different VAs that work for me. So when I look at, internal mobility, there isn't any, right, in my organization, but I still want to encourage them and help them grow to where they want to be. So in that instance, I've found that if I understand who they are and where they want to go, that I can support them through some type of learning while they're with me so that they're moving towards where they want to go out after they leave me.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yep.
Yeah, because
Absolutely.
sometimes we're in a strange situation where there isn't any place to go.
So, we've got a interesting question from the audience that I've always got tons of questions, but I want to take this one from the audience. And the audience attendee is asking, do the panelists have any thoughts on the best way for boutique firm owners in the corporate leadership training space to find and get in touch with decision makers in their industry who already know L&D is important without having to be convinced of its value? And also, what advice do you have for smaller firms to compete successfully against huge training corporations? There are so many things in this question. So, I don't know if anybody wants to, if we want to break it down, or if somebody wants to kind of go, oh yeah, I want to answer that one because I'm particularly intrigued with the whole conversation about corporate leaders already knowing that L&D is important and you don't have to convince them of their value. And, it's like, Tiffany, you worked in, the Fortune 500. Like, do you spend a lot of time convincing people of the value? Yes.
Yes. And one thing, if you're an L&D professional, you want to, this is my opinion, but I think it's really important that you're measuring things that are meaningful to the business and you're speaking the business's language. That is the most critical thing that I think you can do to make sure that you're having an impact in the organization and that your learning is getting in front of your employees.
Okay.
I think one of the challenges there is that there are some, and I completely agree, Tiffany, that, being able to measure and show some impact is one of the easiest ways to convince somebody that something is worthwhile. But I think the challenge is that a lot of times we're talking about things that are a little slipperier to get our hands around. And Tiffany, you were talking about, training people in growth mindset. So that might have some bigger picture influence on the workplace culture, right, at large. But it's not like you can say, oh, this thing happened because of that. And we just have to, in a way, trust that. And that requires a buy-in and a mindset from the CEO folks to say, okay, yeah, there are some things that are really tangible. Like, okay, yes, I can increase my sales by 10%, or I can stop people leaving by 15%. But there are other things that are, in a way, sort of one circle removed from that also have a huge impact, but don't necessarily lead to a line item shift. But ultimately, I think they do in a holistic way. So I think that's the trickier part to convince people of.
Okay.
Julia, I totally agree with that. And it seems to me like if you look hard enough, there's always a business sponsor in the organization that has something that you can tie your learning program or whatever that is to get an outcomes for one of the leaders that's beneficial. Even if, like you say, it's in this slippery area that you can't do that direct tie to. And I honestly think that's one of the biggest challenges that L&D people face, honestly. Yeah, it was a really good point. Thank you.
Teresa?
And I'll add, to be honest with you, to Tiffany's earlier point, is that you do, for me, I found that you really do have to figure out what is important to them. I attended a seminar a few weeks back, and they talked about, L&D can really plug into a lot of key areas outside of just HR. You have your compliance training, but then there's product training. When you think about there are a lot of organizations who are building their own technology and their systems and all these things, but we need to improve technology adoption. How do we do that? Well, we're going to put training together, and you find out, training is just maybe a PDF or a document, and it's still not quite helping learning to stick. And so, I think it's really unfortunately, I guess in a sense, fortunately, unfortunately, you have to wear a little bit of a sales hat in the process. I say, get comfortable with the research, the data that's out there. Gartner, Shrim, HR Exchange Network. There are a lot of reputable sources out there who continuously update and provide information to us that tie learning back. Because leaders, they would think that, oh, employee retention, training, whatever. But the reality is, there's data out there to support it. And if you really understand the people in that business, like walk in and they would have conversation, ask good, meaty, specific questions, you'll really uncover what the real problems are. Is it technology? Is it lack of engagement? I've supported teams where it was a tough time connecting with Gen Zers. They're not really engaged with our training. They say it's outdated and things of that nature. The more you uncover and ask questions about, the more value you can bring from a learning and development perspective. So that's the biggest thing I would say to really get over that hurdle. But you never stop selling. Like, even I've been in situations where they say, "Hey, Teresa, let's do it." Sign the dotted line. I still get in there. I'm still selling. But don't get discouraged. Like, know your stuff. You know your value. You know your data. You know what you're doing, and that's what motivates you to keep going. That's what I would say. That's what's really worked for me.
And from any of you, any advice in terms of competing when you're a small firm versus the huge training organizations?
You know,
Oh,
I
go
say
ahead, Teresa, then we'll grab
you
Tiffany.
I'm the type of person that if I can't go through the front door, I'm gonna go through the back door. If I can't go through the back door, I'm going through the window. Create your own lane. you know, um, and with business, it's all about relationships and community. There are many of avenues to go about beating. I'll say outwin the competition in a sense, because even starting my own practice, I was told, hey, go this way, government contracting, go here, go there. But I found that through trial and error, you find your own lane, you find your tribe of people, and you realize, this I wasn't told about this, and this actually works for me. So there are a lot of learning networks out there. Like ATD is a huge conglomerate. There are, and of course, because I'm trying to tell you, I can't think of the other ones, but there are a number of networks that you can tie yourself to. Is really what I'm really kind of leaning towards to really be a outstanding factor. So I would say think outside the box. Like, don't ever feel like this is the one route to take. There's community out there, there are people out there. There are ways to get it done if that's something that you're ultimately trying to achieve. You just have to figure out what is your lane, position yourself in it, and hold on to it and drive it out.
Great. All right, Tiffany?
I think that was awesome advice, Teresa. I really see, like, when I'm thinking of a smaller training organization versus a larger organization, the nimbleness of the smaller organization is an asset. They can move on a dime. It's not a one size fits all offering. They can customize quicker. I think just the nimbleness brings an advantage in that situation, honestly.
Okay. All right. I want to move on and I want to focus in a little bit on experiential learning and how it can support a company's business goals. And I'm going to preface this by putting it into a little bit of context from me personally. Long ago and far away, I actually worked with a company that did uh, augmented reality and virtual reality training for nuclear power plants. And fascinating technology because, you kind of don't want to like set the trainees loose on the nuclear power plant controls. You want to know that they've got an or they have experience before you let them touch anything. Is that what we're talking about when it comes to experiential learning, or is it something else entirely? So I'm going to point to Julia first because I know you've got something to say on this.
I do, yeah. So I think your example is a really nice one, Bobby, because when we think about designing any kind of learning experience, what we really need to be thinking about is what's our goal and what is the context that we're working within. So there's no one strategy that is going to be best for something. It's going to depend. So in that particular situation, you cannot go and wander around the nuclear facility safely. Therefore, but I think we would all probably agree that that would be best if you could, because you actually get the true experience. But if you can't do that, then a safer alternative will be to use some other technology. And I think the key there is that we're not saying that, oh, the technology is great and is going to enhance something necessarily, but what we're saying is we are adapting to a particular context there. When we think about experiential learning, I think it's one of those terms that gets bandied around a lot, but is not necessarily being used in the same way by everyone. There's not necessarily a common language or a common definition. And I think what it leads to is this idea that, oh, just having someone do something is enough. And if you think about, I think about my parents who are playing golf for a million years. They play golf every single weekend. Do they improve? No. They're exactly the same. Maybe they get a smidge better, or maybe they get a smidge worse because, and why? They're not having anybody, an expert who's coming in and helping guide them and coach them and show them where they're going right and where they're going wrong. And so when we think about experiential learning, we really need to be intentional about that element of both coaching, support, guidance, attaching it to something that you already know, and having some reflection. So if you just dump someone into an experience and expect them to learn something, you're going to be disappointed because they're not going to get what you want them to get from it. But if you set them up at the outset with some prior knowledge, and you're helping them see what this real world experience is, how it aligns to what they already know, and how they can apply that to what they, apply this new stuff to what they already know, how they can move forward with some, again, support and intentional reflection can be really, really powerful. And particularly so in situations, like flight simulations and all these things where we cannot actually experience something, then we can couple technology with an experiential learning model. But I think that the mistake is just to say, oh yeah, just go do it, is experiential learning.
All right, Teresa, experiential learning.
Yeah. Now, earlier I said if I can't go through the front door, I'll go through the back door. If I can't get in the back door, I'll go through the window. So, and I talk about that because for me, my entire career path has been a case of experiential learning. To be honest with you, I've been in situations where I had the information where I could go through self-paced learning, and then I could go through live trainings. But I've also learned a key thing is to position yourself in where you find someone who is in that field or doing the work that you want to do. In a mentor position, basically, ask them questions, get a clear understanding, look at the current skills that you have. For example, I'm in L&D, and over the years, I've had a chance to create simulations. I've done a little bit of graphic design, I've done animation, I've done all these different things. And for a time, I thought about, what would it look like for me to transition over to marketing? How could that look for me? So going out and finding someone who's in that space and saying, what are some key skills about your job that you do on a daily basis? What's missing? What's things I should improve my skills in? Don't be afraid to ask questions to people. You'll be amazed by the amount of support and feedback that you get along the way. And so, because when I look at experiential learning, it's simply learning by doing. It's an opportunity to it's kind of a safe space. Honestly, you have the comfort of being in your existing position, knowing, okay, I know this job, I know what I'm doing, but I'm learning these skills. Let me see if I can go out and apply it. So if I found this person who's in that role, hey, and I ask some questions, can I work with you? Can we collaborate on some things here? I think that's a great way to kind of get your feet wet, build your skills up, and decide, is this the right path for me? Because for some people, you might decide, what, I'm really curious. This is what I want to do. You know what? I'm curious. I found out I don't want to go that route. So that's how I really look at experiential learning and really putting it into practice. It's a safe way to fail forward, if you will.
Hey, I do particularly love Julia's example about golf because, I think that that's I can instantly envision, people just practicing, 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 but without that input. And maybe they don't have anybody to ask questions of. So I know as a manager, I know that there are people that work on my team who perhaps don't know what they don't know. And maybe they don't feel comfortable asking questions. Love to hear from each one of you. How do we encourage teams to ask questions? Why is it important? Like, what are the things that we can do to encourage our employees? And I'm going to say, how do we encourage ourselves to have that open attitude that encourages us to ask questions as we are learning new things? So,
I'll answer that. I mean, I think one thing is to be, again, very upfront and outspoken about things being experiments or trying things out and normalizing mistakes and normalizing the unknown. And so I think when we can, you know, encourage innovation, encourage creativity in an environment. And, you know, again, the term safe space gets tossed around a lot, but I think for me, what it really means is that there is a deep, deep foundation of trust that comes from, you know, the top down, where you really feel and you have experience that, you know, if you ask a question or if you have an idea and maybe it doesn't work out, maybe it does, that it's okay, you know. And I think when we create these sandboxes or containers where we can be experimenting and practicing and trying things, then it can just be really helpful to not have people be so sort of constrained or fearful of doing things like that. And I think when you can encourage people, yeah, to speak their mind, be feel comfortable with that, see teammates as, you know, collaborators and not competitors, you know, be, you know, practiced and okay at receiving critical feedback, because we all have to get critical feedback at some point, you know. And you know, being able to brainstorm, express ideas, even if they're not fully formed, all of those things, but they have to be modeled from the leadership level and not just be sort of talked about, but not actually demonstrated or embraced.
okay. Teresa, I saw you had unmuted earlier on that one.
I don't know. I was just thinking that, you know, challenge yourselves to be uncomfortable. You know, I think as a leader, there you have, to Julia's earlier point, you really have to demonstrate walking the walk and talking the talk, and open that door to say, hey, are you enjoying the work that you're doing? Is there more of X, Y, and Z that you would like to do? Like, be genuinely interested in the people that you are supporting. I think as time progresses, you build that relationship, you break down that barrier for them to feel like this is somebody I can trust and have this conversation to say, you know what, I really like doing X, Y, and Z, but I don't really enjoy doing these particular tasks in my role. Is it a possibility where I can do more of X, Y, and Z? I think when as a leader you open that door and ask those questions, you'll start getting that feedback, and then I think as time progresses, you'll see that your employees are in turn asking you questions and asking for feedback and so on and so forth. It becomes that revolving door. So I think that's the biggest thing though. If you're in a position where you're uncomfortable, get yourselves uncomfortable. Maybe, and if you're the employee, maybe practice with a friend or practice with someone who you do trust to start that conversation first. But I think it requires you to challenge yourself to really go the extra mile in starting that conversation from the leader perspective and even the employee giving that feedback as well.
All right. Tiffany. Oh, Tiffany.
Bobby, when I think about that, asking questions, leaders asking questions, I always go back to meetings, right? All of us have been in a meeting where a leader comes in, maybe you're talking about a problem, and the leader provides their opinion on the solution. And then we see everybody else shut down, right? But we've also been in another meeting where the leader comes in with the problem, and all of a sudden, everybody is involved. They're sharing their ideas. They're in the flow. Stuff, really exciting things are happening. I mean, we are such social animals. through the right leadership, just in a simple meeting, you can move a group into that safer environment where they get into flow, they're sharing ideas, and they're developing trust with each other, and probably coming up with a much better solution than the meeting where the leader decided this was the solution. Right. So I always think about, I think it was Steve Jobs, wasn't it? Wasn't he the one who would never say in the beginning? He always waited until the end of the meeting to bring his thoughts to the conversation. I think it was him. But that always, I always keep that in top of mind. Now, whether I do it or not, that's a completely different thing, right? But the idea is awesome.
I have to admit, when you first started talking, I was like, this sounds like I need to attend fewer meetings. I'm taking that. I'm going to take that away from that. And also, I want to encourage our audience. If you have a question, I have tons of questions, but if you have a question, if you can use that Q&A function, that'd be super helpful. Drop that in for our panel of experts to answer. That would be fantastic. And while people are thinking about what those questions are, um, I want to. There were some terms that the three of you threw around earlier when we were talking. Things like transition points and also competency paths. There were some interesting things, and I think one of those was competency paths. So I'm going to throw another survey at our audience. Have you created competency paths for your teams? So if you can answer that, our studio audience today, have you created a competency path for your team? And the answer options are yes, no, and what is a competency path? So maybe our experts can address some of this terminology that you're hearing in learning development. Is there a term? I'm going to give each of you a shot at this. Doesn't have to be competency path, doesn't have to be transition points. Like, are there some terms that people should know going into these conversations about learning and development? Anybody want to start on that one? Everybody's looking at me like, no, Bobby, we don't want to define the terms in our industry. All right, competency path, because we do have answers from most of our audience now. There's a good portion of people that have no idea what a competency path is. That includes me. What is a competency path, Teresa?
Yeah, I'll dive in. So, the simplified version of what a competency path is essentially the steps it takes to become proficient, or let's say skilled at a particular level. So, let's say if you were, I always throw this out here, but a frontline employee, what is it? What are the skills I need to acquire to maybe grow to a frontline manager or a key holder, or whatever that next level is? Companies are just a bit of skills. Think of that step or that ladder to climb up to that next level. Competency path just gives you those steps, piece by piece, so you get to that level.
Gotcha.
And
All right.
I think I'd also add to that, again, thinking about if you take a job that has perhaps multiple levels of complexity within it, that as a when you think about learning, we can't learn every single thing that we need to know to do a job on the first day, right? So you can also think about it as, what is the first step, or the stuff that you need to learn and to know to actually get off the ground and start doing the job. Do that for a while, and then what's the next touch point where there might be some additional training and learning that will now be rooted in the context that you've been working in? Because when you're a brand new novice, it's really difficult to be taking in all sorts of new information when you don't really know what's related to, which is important, how do you prioritize it. And so with a little bit of experience within a position, now you can come at that next sort of set of knowledge with a little bit more of an informed view, which makes it that much more efficient. So we can think about it too, not just as a movement up into a different job, but as a progression and growth within a current position.
Okay. Tiffany, other terms that you want people to know when we're talking about L&D?
I feel like there's so many. It's like such a
Yeah,
easy
it's like
grab.
dang.
It's like a
We're so
Pandora's box, Bobby. Yeah.
Yeah. We're so entrenched in them, we don't even know what they are anymore, right?
Yeah. Transition points, like, you know, what role do transition points play? What is a transition point? That was one of the questions I got gifted by my team, and I'm like, maybe I need to get that defined for them.
Do you mean transition point in a role? Is that the way?
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yep.
Okay. So you've perhaps worked in a particular role and now you're at a transition point where you either want to leave or move on, or is that?
Yeah, and I think for a lot of people, you know, you have a choice to make when you are working inside a company, and there comes a time in your life where perhaps you've got a decision to make. Let's call it a
Mhm.
decision point.
Yeah.
You know, do you stay or do you go? Do you try and get that promotion or a new job, lateral moves, all of those things? Like, where is L&D touching that situation and that thought process for employees and for bosses?
I mean, I think it really depends, as so many things do. And I think for me, it's about having an awareness that that's even a thing, you know, and so not having blinders on as a leader to somebody who is perhaps outwardly seems happy and content and trudging along and doing their job, but really having a moment of, okay, you know, so and so has been in this job for 5 years. You know, I would imagine that a conversation with them would be helpful to see, you know, what are their personal goals? How do their goals align with the organizational goals? Are there things that they've been secretly, you know, hoping that somebody would give them, or opportunities that they would like that perhaps they haven't had the opportunity, or haven't felt that they had the opportunity to voice? And so having conversations with your team about their, you know, development, about their trajectory, I think is really important. And just as a leader, being aware of that, you know, just because someone is not talking about it all the time doesn't mean that it's not there under the surface.
Are there signs that we should be watching for as managers? Somebody's made a decision that they are going. Are there any secret signals?
You know, I think to Julie's other point, I think all of it just varies, you know, because when I think about transition points, I think about, for me, I think about transferable skills. And so let's say you've been a office manager for the last 5 years and you say, you know what, I want to go over into customer service. Well, what are some of the things you've been doing as an office manager? You know, you're good with talking to people, you're good with setting expectations, you're customer oriented, you know, really thinking about key skills that you probably have never even considered on a daily basis because you just do that job. Those are skills you've acquired as an office manager that easily translate over to customer service. So I, I, I don't know if they're necessarily cues. I think if you're a leader who has good conversations with your employees on a regular, you know, like, are you enjoying the work that you're doing? Do you want to do more of X, Y, and Z? I think based on those responses, you can identify where they might want to go next, and look at, you know, is there a transition point in this company that's available? You know, or, and if that's something that they are adamant about and passionate for, you might see in the long run they might be transitioning out because they want to grow in their career, whichever way that looks to them, um, to get to that next level. But I think that's where those cues may come in, and I think about, you know, understanding what those skills are that they might want to take on to that next role.
Okay. All right. I'm gonna bring us back. I think one of the most important questions that we have to ask slash answer is, how do leaders make time for all of this? And I'm gonna start with you, Tiffany. How do we make the time? You're muted.
So on the call today, we just loaded all kinds of stuff up, right, on everything leaders need to do. But I believe that really it comes down to our role as a leader is to really grow others, right? That's what is our job as a leader to do. And from my perspective, that means dedicating a certain portion of your daily and weekly activities in doing that. Now, that looks different for everybody, but a lot of times, we want to build on existing habits that we have. So if you're already having meetings with your employees, then maybe it means just adjusting those one-on-one meetings to be a discussion about progress or challenges or growth opportunities for that employee. Maybe it's delegating or putting them on a stretch assignment to really push a team member out of their comfort zone. It can look like allocating dedicated learning time for yourself, showing that you do that, but also making sure your employees do it too. And maybe even, and then I'm going to go back to my favorite thing, growth mindset. So when you're having a conversation with your employees, that you're demonstrating a growth mindset, promoting curiosity to really deepen their thinking, their questioning, and diversity of thought.
Right. Right.
I,
Julia?
just one thing to add on that. I think that another big component of it is not putting all of the onus on the employee to be in charge of it. And so helping support people to know, where are the learning opportunities, what are the options, what are the things that are available to them, and helping build that into one's schedule in some way. And so if you can have and I know it's difficult, time is very valuable, but if there can be some dedicated, within the workday time that is focused on professional development, is much more powerful than having people go off and do something after work, which tends to be something that sows the seeds of resentment. And as a leader, I think you can, again, as with all these things, you can model that for people. You can do it. You can have learning on your schedule. You can build it in, but just not having this perfunctory, oh, here's your performance review, and oh yes, are there any PD opportunities you want? Okay, go get them. I mean, that's, it's like a teacher opening the classroom and saying, okay, kids, come on in and have at it. That's not an effective way to help people learn.
Hey. And Teresa?
I would say just to keep it simple. I know we're all busy. We have a multitude of things to do, but just like you would put maybe 30 minutes or an hour on your calendar for lunch, put 15-minute learning blocks on your calendar every day of the week. I think, and do that both ways as a leader, as an employee, to really demonstrate that and support it. Because, and to the earlier point made, I think letting employees know, where are the resources? Do we have we have LinkedIn Learning, we have Coursera, whatever you have available to them, let them know it's there, and make time for it. Have discussions around it. If you have a one-on-one that's talking about performance, have another 15 minutes carved out within that one-on-one or a separate session that's talking about, what did they learn this week? What are some ways you want to go about applying what you learned this week? Um, I think that's a healthy way to keep it simple, keep it easy, fit into your busy schedule, and really, again, promote that learning culture. And it empowers each other, as an organization.
Excellent. All right. Thank you, all three of you, Tiffany Whitney, Teresa Scott, Julia Phelan. I can't thank you all enough for joining us today, and also you in the audience. Thank you for taking time out for setting aside time for your own learning. I did want to address one thing that both Julia and Teresa said, which was setting aside time for learning is important. So I think that you did all a fantastic job in doing that today. Thank you again, everyone, and we'll see you at our next Lioness community event. Thank you, everyone, for joining us today. Take care, everyone. Bye bye.